or good afternoon. Okay, so we have got a special podcast episode coming up here, and I think this one is going to be a good one and something that's probably worth addressing in more than just a private message back to the lovely lass that asked this question. So this is the reason why we're going live with this topic, and we're going to start this in 2 minutes. So it's so nice to be doing a podcast at what is 3 o'clock in the afternoon Brisbane time, 4 o'clock in Sydney, instead of 5 o'clock in the morning. So how are we, guys? Make sure you say hi in the comments, and we're going to be getting started in this in 1.5 minutes. And we're going to be talking about one of the posts that's just been made inside our Better Body Academy group. So, guys, if you're watching, there's 8 or 9 of you that are already here. Make sure you get into the comments. Hey, Jace, how you going? I love yous all. And we're going to be rocking in 1 minute. Look at my main men and women here. Tezza, how are you, mate? Lovely to have your company here, bro. We got a few Facebook users. We got M. Kelly. How are you, M? 1 minute till we start, guys. Now, Trent Barnett's here, the legend. We got Mikey. Hello, homie. How are you, mate? Burns is here. Gosh, you're getting consistent, Burns. I love it. Ash is here as well. Now, I've got an idea. If any of you are, obviously a lot of us are watching this inside the Better Body Academy group, but I think this is the sort of one which would be worth, if you have any friends that struggle with this, tagging them in this video on my profile, because I think that if this is relevant, which I think it will be to a lot of people, this might be a good kind of signpost to point them towards. Hello, Ash. How are you? We're starting in 20 seconds, guys. Hello, Jimmy. Dan's in here. Oh, look at this. You come in afternoon time, you get Amy Brown. How good is that? All right, guys. I reckon we are ready to rock and roll, and hopefully my kids are going to play it safe as well. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Better Body Academy podcast. Of course, this is the podcast where you come to when you're sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. And now in this special episode, I am going to be giving my thoughts on a question that we've just received. And it comes from a very beautiful lass inside our Women's Academy. I don't know if it's so much a question or more for a frustrating outburst about why specifically she's struggling with this challenge. So without further ado, we're just going to get straight into the question. And for our listeners, I'm going to read the question out, and for our viewers, I'm going to display it on your screen here. So this was the post. I don't know what is wrong with me sometimes. My weight's gotten to a dangerous point again. I'm getting out of breath and finding a lot of things difficult. One thing I've not done this time is hide away. I'm still getting out there and doing what I know I'm fearful of judgment. In the past, I would try to stay home and avoid people. My partner and I are both concerned. I have a plan. I know what to do. I know what works. I have a plan inside of Better Body Academy to do it. With the nutrition side of things, it's like there is a wall up. I'm finding it really hard. I often think, what is it going to take for me to get the nutrition side of things right? Does something have to happen to me health-wise to give me that scare to actually do it? Or will it be too late? It's so frustrating. I know it's up to me. I know I need to get out of my own way, and I'm just finding it so bloody hard. On a positive note, I have kept up my streak of 42 days of 10,000 steps. Wow. Okay, so what a banger of a question. Guys, let us know in the comments if you relate to this. My boy Chris Hill says very relevant info for me. So I think the first thing that kind of points up here is there feels like whenever we suffer from something like this, it feels like there's a level of self-sabotage going on, right? It's so frustrating when we just can't bring ourselves to do the thing that we need to do. And what I always say to people in this situation, whether it's weight, whether it's sabotaging making money, whether it's consistently sabotaging your relationship, I mean, it's not just specific to weight loss. What I always want you to know as a first point is that, number one, you are not on your own, okay? We are here to help. But more importantly, number two is that you are not the only person suffering this, okay? And it's very important to understand this, because I think that when you are feeling something which is a real internal battle like this, it's very easy to make conclusions about, I'm fucking useless, I'm a stupid human, I'm a dumb human. And what happens is this condemnation of yourself digs you a deeper hole, which causes further destruction of your self-image and self-belief. Like, there's 20 people watching this live. I want you to give me a hear if you understand this pattern that can happen. I try to do something, I can't get myself to execute, I fail. Because I fail, I have what's called meta feelings, and that is feelings about feelings. So because I've failed, I feel like a failure, and because I feel like a failure, I feel dumb, and because I feel dumb, I feel worse, and it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And it becomes a hole that we dig ourselves. So the first thing that I want to say to this lass is congratulations on not hiding. But the point is absolutely true. The point about, do I need to have something happen to me in order to actually do something to make this work? I think a lot of us get to the point where we almost have to have a heart attack, get diabetes, like have something that knocks us off our world to actually get to the point where we act, where we do something. And this is the battle of transformation. This is why I always say that weight loss is simple. It's so simple. But transformation is so difficult. And the reason is because it's not just, if it was as simple as saying stop eating that, right? We wouldn't have a situation where 2/3 of the world is overweight. This is why people are resorting to weight loss surgery, because they can't get themselves to do what they need to do. So clearly this is a chronic problem. This is not a problem of kind of, something that's just simple to fix. And when you think of all the reasons that it's become a chronic problem, well, look at the practicalities. We're less active than we've ever been. We are losing muscle mass. Our testosterone rates are dropping off the planet. And the most important thing is that hyperpalatable foods are all around us. They're all around us. And we're exposed to them. So this is a real thing. This is not like a pretend thing that this client is going on about. And maybe the first place I will touch here is on the possibility, and I'm obviously we're not mentioning names here, but talking in a closed group. There is a possibility here that there's more going on, that this is leaning towards becoming something like binge eating disorder. And I can't say that is it, but I just question if over a long period of time you can't get yourself to do the things that you want to do, then I think it's worth perhaps entertaining that and just making sure that we rule that out. Some signs and symptoms of binge eating disorder might be just completely chaotic eating patterns, feeling completely out of control around food, like you're impulsive, like you're eating to the point where you're uncomfortably full, like you're eating when you're not actually hungry, like you're expending excessive money on food, like you're feeling numb after eating, like you have low self-esteem around eating. There's many different components to this, but let's consider this first. And if we're able to rule that out, we can be a little bit more practical in our approach. But if it is indeed maybe something a little bit more sinister going on here, then that's also worth exploring with the relevant health professionals as well. So the two things that I want to talk about here are around the habit. So if you repeatedly are doing something that you don't want to do, let's reverse engineer that. What is the trigger that continues to cause you to do the thing that you want to do? Now, most of us overeat because of something happening to us that triggers us to overeat. We use food as a stress management tool. We use food as a boredom management tool. We use food as an emotional management tool. Why? Because food feels comfortable. It actually makes us feel good, at least in the short term. So what is the trigger that continues to cause the binge, the overeating, or the uncontrolled eating? Is there something that you notice in your eating? If you're watching this, is there something that you notice in your eating? Is it every time you get on the phone to a certain person? Is it every time you are exposed to a certain TV show? Is it a person at work or a conversation at work? Is it when you're extremely tired? Because from a practical perspective, it makes sense that we address the trigger rather than wondering why it continues to happen. So what is the trigger that's actually happening that causes you to continue to do the thing that you don't want to do? And often addressing the trigger can help. Sometimes this trigger is a chronic thing that's been happening for years and years and years. And the thing that comes to mind for me is recurring trauma. Okay? Recurring trauma. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is the case in this person's situation, but let's say that you had a history of physical abuse when you were younger. You may use food as a comfort when you feel that trauma coming up in you. So sometimes the trigger is something that maybe you think is, it's when I'm tired. But it's actually when you're tired that you feel that trauma resurging. And it's not actually the tiredness that's the problem, it's the undealt with trauma. Does this make sense, guys? The second part to this is I want you to consider how much of this is rooted in having a very fixed identity around who you are. We've witnessed some incredible transformations in Better Body Academy, like ridiculously good transformations. And the common theme in those transformations is the person manages to change their identity. If I look at someone like my man, Trent Barnett, as an example, he managed to change his identity from someone who was self-condemning and had a hell of a lot of trauma and considered himself a fat heap. But he's been able, through time, to overcome that identity, to which now, I dare say, Trent, you could comment, if you're still watching, you consider yourself a healthy man. And that has happened because you've got a now 12-month plus history of where you have evidence of you being a healthy man. And so what comes first? The evidence? Is the evidence coming first, or do the habits come first? Whatever the case, I would suggest that the way that you go about changing your identity is to start doing the thing that you want to do. As an example, when we look at Trent, Trent could think about following a nutrition plan, tracking his nutrition, doing his steps, going to the gym. He could think about all those things, but nothing would happen because thinking has nothing to do with doing. When he started doing, around a year and a half ago, he started doing, what happened was he saw some early results. And because he saw some early results, it reinforced his belief about, hey, you know what? I can change. And he went from having a fixed mindset around his weight to entertaining the idea that, hang on, maybe I'm not a fat blop as he might have described himself before. Maybe actually I can do this. So I think there's two key points here. There's what is the recurring trigger? Number one, why does this client continue to find herself in a situation? What is the recurring trigger? And secondly, whilst you might say otherwise, do you really just think that, you know what, my genetics are that I've always been overweight, I always will be overweight, so everything you do in the present is a self-sabotage of your results because at a deep level, I just believe I'm overweight and that's the end of the story. And if that is the case with any person who wants to make change, you will never make change. And that's not being negative and saying you shouldn't be able. The fact is, when there is a fragmentation or friction between identity and behavior, identity will always win. This is why in Atomic Habits, which we describe in Better Body Academy as the Bible, this is why in Atomic Habits, the author describes the importance of not just changing what you do outside in, but changing who you are inside out. Focusing on who do you want to be? What are your core values? What do you stand for? Having a vision for how you want to be so that when you start doing the thing, you're not all of a sudden in complete, like, why am I doing this? Does this make sense? The final thing that I want to talk about is, how do you go about actually, if this isn't something that's rooted in something a bit more sinister, like binge eating disorder, as an example, is this just a pattern? Is this just a really strong, long-term pattern that needs to be broken? Is this what it is? Because the reality is we all have patterns and some of them don't cause us. As an example, I think that my beautiful lady Cordia has in fact, right before this call, I asked her, I said, do you think you have a shopping addiction? And she said, no, because I can shop and stop at any time. I don't have to do it. I'm not impulsed into doing it all the time. However, under the right conditions and in the right environment, I'll just keep shopping. So the question is, what is your environment like at home? We know that if my beautiful missus comes and she's got money on her credit card and she is in a place like Noosa where beautiful boutique shops line the foreshore, that's a combination for impulsive shopping. You've got the trigger, which is all of the shops being there, and you've got the means, which is the credit card capacity, and you put those two things together, and she shops. So let's go back to our client here in the question asker. What is your environment like at home? Is it inspiring of the life that you want? Is it inspiring of the life that you want? Because if it's not, then change is really going to be difficult. It's going to be freaking hard because you've got no reminders around you about why you're doing this thing. The second observation, and I really appreciate our client letting us do this live, is what role is your partner playing here? Because I don't know your partner at all. What I know is that you love each other very dearly because you've talked about it in our mastermind program. But one thing I notice is that your partner is not overweight in any fashion. So, have you got a team approach to this weight? If you're both concerned, do you have a team approach? And the reason that this is important is because if your partner's not overweight and you feel that you need to get rid of some weight, then your partner may not be purposely enabling you, but not consciously aware of how important this is for you to change. So she might be going about her day buying food for the family that's available to you all the time, which if it was you doing the shopping, you know that you wouldn't buy those foods because you'd be tempted to binge them all the time, and then that's causing the issue. But if she's looking at the situation through her eyes, not yours, no fault of hers at all, I could see how there would be a situation there whereby Claudia said to me just now, she said, if there's donuts and pastries in the kitchen, I'm eating it. There's no part of it which is like, that's going to last the rest of the day. I'm eating it. So it might sound quite obvious, but if you have crappy food available to you all the time, well then you're going to eat it, probably. So one of the key features of behavior change is just don't have the crappy food on hand. Like if this is something you really want to change, it's about breaking a pattern. And don't just subtract the crappy food, inverted commas, substitute the crappy food. So don't just take away the chips, put some light popcorn in its place. Don't just take away all the dips, put some seaweed sakata crackers and some cottage cheese in their place. So when that impulse comes up where you want to binge or eat, you have to go an extra step of driving to the shops to actually go and get it. It would be the same. I mean, let's bring it back to a very easy example to use. If you were an alcoholic and you had cartons of beer sitting in your garage or your fridge ready to consume, like, of course, the moment you feel the weakness, you're going to go and have the things because it's available there. But we don't see food in the same way that we might see a drug or an alcohol being freely available. So if we think about, food in that way, if food is our drug and we're using it in a way that's maybe not healthy, well, then don't make the food that you don't want to consume so easily available, because we know that the moment we get bored, emotional, or stressed, that need to comfort ourselves is going to be there. One thing is true. The way that our friend ended the post was to say, and I've done 42 days of 10,000 steps, which is something I've stuck to. And I want to say that is epic. That is so good. So clearly, you've got some willpower. But I think, as a qualified dietitian, the message is always going to be the same. And let's come into the camera, team. You are never, ever, ever, ever going to outrun your nutrition. You could do 500 steps, 500 days of 10,000 steps, and it would help, but you're not going to be able to burn off the overconsumption of calories. There's the simple example that I always use. I was talking to one of the boys this afternoon. A Big Mac is 550 calories. To burn 550 calories in exercise terms, you need to do about 4 gym sessions. 4 gym sessions to burn off 1 Big Mac. So can you see how trying to use exercise as a tool to burn off the food calories it's futile. It's never going to work. The only way to do this is to change the way you eat. But as we've discussed in this podcast, the eating is embedded in so many layers. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that if it's embedded in all those layers, we've got partner support, as Barney said. We've set up our house or our kitchen or our cupboard to be supportive of what we actually want to do. We need to make going and getting the things that we don't want to eat extremely hard to do, not simple and easy and available. We need to think about what are the triggers that keep coming up every time I do the thing that I don't want to do. We need to ask ourselves, is there any level of hidden, trauma that's involved in my eating to which the repeating medicine is food? And how can I can keep treating the symptom, or I can try to move through whatever the trauma is that's the trigger or the catalyst in the first place. And lastly, just consider that when we think of eating disorders, we typically think of the under eating. There are obviously compulsive eating disorders which are at the other end, in terms of binge eating disorders, and that could be a possibility that's worth entertaining as well. Guys, I'm going to wrap it there. I wanted to come in and just have an open discussion about this. The brave nature of the post shows how our girl really wants to make some change. Really, really wants to make some change. And I'm absolutely confident that you will be able to do that. Like, you will be able to do it because we've seen it being done. We don't want to wait until we have a heart attack to knock our world completely off tilt to then actually do it then. Isn't that the key to transformation? It's being able to do the thing before the thing becomes a problem. Guys, this has been another episode of the podcast. I hope this has been beneficial and maybe got you thinking a little bit. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Let me know in the comments, by the way, what you think and whether you have anything to add to this, because, of course, I'm coming at this from, a trained dietitian perspective with some insight into some eating disorder experience. But, of course, there's a real life perspective or component to this. And if you do have anything to add, please pop it into the comments. It'd be most appreciated. I'll see you guys in the next episode.